Welcome everyone to Magma Rage's episode 51. Thank you, Pandemonia, for that lovely intro jingle. How are you doing?
I'm doing great at yourself. How you doing?
I'm good. So, there were some big announcements this week. The Year of the Raven is going to be our next standard year, as the Year of the Mammoth will be rotating out when the next expansion releases. And with that next expansion, we will get the Year of the Raven. So, let's jump right into talking about the Year of the Raven. Um, First of all, the name. The first thing I thought of was Raven, unfortunately, the caster, and that's gonna set. We're gonna be set for some very smug casts from him
And that's
in
really
this
become
standard
the
year.
meme.
Yeah. At least there were some good memes. I'm not sure if Blizzard did that intentionally or if they just didn't care. But yeah. So, yep. The sets that will be rotating out are Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, uh, Whispers of the
Whispers of the
Old
Old God.
Gods, and now I forgot the third one.
One Night in
Oh, One Night
Karazhan.
in Karazhan. Yes, yes, yes. So those are the sets that will be rotating out. Um, and we're going to be getting another 3 expansion year. That's the trend now going forward. Um, and the one big change that they announced basically to go with this is the Hall of Fame inductees. So some cards are also going to be rotating out of standard and going into the Hall of Fame. So let's have a look at these 3 cards. So first off, we have Ice Block. This is the one that we've mentioned a couple times before on the podcast that we thought was pretty likely um, to actually go up or to actually change. Because we've pointed a few times at them kind of hinting towards it, and it's not really a surprise. What are your thoughts on the ice block change, Panamonia, or ice
It,
block Hall of Faming?
it's honestly it's something like personally I don't have like as much as annoying. I think Ice Block was a cool card,
Mm.
but it's something that I think a lot of professionals, a lot of people have been talking for a long time about it being either nerfed or moved to Hall of Fame, because at the end of the day, especially if you're looking at the broader player base, which is let's say more newer and casual players, and it like as cool as the concept is, Ice Block makes for games that are unfun, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a case of no matter how big a board, no matter how aggressive you were, the mage can buy themselves 2 extra turns, right? And you can have a massive board, you bash them, you pop the ice block, and they can do whatever they want.
Yep.
You know, and a lot of the times you bash them once, they set up an ice block, spend their 7 mana doing stuff, clearing your board or healing or whatever, and then they can
Burning
do it
your
again next turn.
face.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So I mean, ice block has become a key card for a lot of mage decks that are kind of oriented around combos of some sorts. I mean, originally we saw this with freeze mage. And Freeze Mage has kind of largely fallen out of the picture these days. Nowadays, it's Quest Mage, which is one of the most infuriating decks for most people to play against. So, in terms of making the majority of the player base happy, the Ice Block rotation makes sense there. And I think largely Ice Block was just a very powerful card that kind of dictated some of the strategies for Mage, and I think that's largely why they want to, get rid of it from standard at least. They want to see some more rather different kind of defensive strategies for Mage.
yeah, they're trying to promote. Like they said, they want to promote different archetypes. But the problem is, and some other podcasts and other pros have kind of noted, is that by them slowly moving some of these cards, even the previous rotation to the Hall of Fame, some of the classes are losing a bit of their identity. In terms of what
Yeah.
makes what makes a mage a mage. What makes the different classes uniquely their class.
Yeah, and they're just losing cards, right? So now Mage has less cards than every other class, I believe, after this, because Mage would have had 2 cards to rotate to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's true as well. I did read somewhere. I'm not sure if it was speculation or confirmed that they were actually considering either moving cards from other sets to classic or adding new cards or something. I
Yeah.
can't. I'm not sure if it was just speculative or a little more concrete than that.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea. Something that is definitely going to be necessary if they keep moving cards out of classes. Mage has also lost Ice Lance previously.
Yep.
Um, And so at the moment, certain classes just have more cards. Warrior, Druid, uh, who else? Priest has never had anything rotated. Yeah, so there's a bunch of. But I mean, at this point, it's pretty insignificant when it's just one card. But immediately after standard rotation, that one card will be worth more as a percentage of the total card pool, right?
Yeah.
Because we're gonna have three whole sets rotating out and only one coming in at first. So it might me be a little bit more impactful in the future, and they are definitely gonna have to look at a way of doing that. But yeah, that is an idea I would like, but not one we can really have any kind of confirmation on now. So
Yep.
overall, I think Ice Block definitely an expected change. I'm pretty sad to see it go because I like a lot of the mage decks that play it, except Exodia Mage. Um, and yeah, overall, where do you think this is gonna leave Mage, just purely based on this
So,
change?
so based on this change, it's going to make any sort of slower defensive or more control mage a lot weaker.
Hmm.
They might still be decks with cards like your Arcane Artificer and your Jaina, your
Yeah.
Frostlich, but ultimately, it looks like Mage is definitely going to dominate with more your tempo-based decks. So like similar to your current Secret Mage, or going back a little bit in time, your just tempo mage with flame wakers and mana worm. Basically, like people joke, mana worm mage.
Yeah, the big thing this does for Mage is instead of allowing Mage to be very reserved with its defensive tools, it now has to be a lot more proactive with its defensive tools because you can't let your HP get down to zero, then clear their board and develop your second ice block, and then start healing up with Frostage Jane or Arcane Artificers or something like that. You actually have to be much more proactive in making sure the board doesn't snowball out of control.
Or
Uh,
gain
so
life before that, or
yeah,
gain
yeah.
life before you die.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to mean that I think a lot of the slower mage decks are not going to be able to be as greedy as they might be now because they'll have to have more defensive tools.
Yep.
But it's definitely going to be something that they might need to give mage a few more defensive tools if they want to keep these slower kind of mages around as well. Uh, Moving on to the next card. This is a neutral card. It is Cold Light Oracle, probably one of the most surprising changes.
Yeah.
Um,
Not a card I honestly expected.
yeah. So I mean,
When you think about it, I can understand it to a degree. The whole
yeah,
idea that neutral card draw, and the fact that its effect can be abused. But I think probably one of what a lot of sort of commentary has been on is that probably the reason why they retain is also it allows them to introduce other sort of card draw effects, whether symmetrical or asymmetrical, in the future expansions, without the
yeah,
risk of like mill strategies becoming a problem, right?
yeah, and also allowing more interactions with Battlecry. That's something that they've wanted to do, especially with they say limits some designs related to Battlecry and effects that return a minion to the hand. I mean, if we think about returning a minion to the hand, that's very popular in Quest Rogue for one. So maybe this means they could be printing more bounce effects,
Oh
and maybe
dear.
that'll actually help Quest Rogue get a bit better. Because Cold Light Oracle is currently a card we do see in Quest Rogue, so does actually kind of affect that deck negatively. But yeah, overall, the downside of your opponent milling you, especially when it comes as a surprise, is really annoying. Like I played, I think it was Synth Class a bunch of times on ladder last season, playing his mill Warlock, and then he just, like it looked like a control Warlock, and then all of a sudden Cold Light Oracle, and you're like, oh, okay, that's unfortunate in this Warlock mirror. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Cold Light Oracle, it's definitely a card that the downside is most often not used as a downside because basically the downside is so great that the only time you can afford to put the card in your deck is when the downside is no longer a downside.
Yeah, when you're abusing it, or exploiting it,
Yeah,
to some effect.
yeah. Which does allow for interesting deck building, but obviously, I think this one to me screams that Blizzard have some specific plans in the future, rather than this card is OP or oppressive now, or
Yeah.
um, it's certainly not a card that's in every kind of deck.
Yeah, it's definitely they're trying to open up some avenues and they want to, give some other options.
Yeah, and beyond this hurting Quest Rogue that we kind of mentioned, it's gonna hurt Mill Rogue a lot, obviously. Call That
It hurts
Oracle
any
is
combo deck really. I mean, any
basically. well, Cold Light Oracle is basically necessary for Mill Rogue. Like, I don't think you can really play
Yeah.
Kingsbane as a mill deck anymore without Cold Light Oracle, um, because you have no
That's,
way to force
that's,
your opponent to draw, and that's a problem.
I was gonna say, but then I realized the card was rotated. Dancing Sword.
Uh,
I think that's
yeah,
like a really old. I think that's from like Nex.
yeah, that's next Ramus. So maybe we'll see some more ways. Okay, Nat the Darkfisher technically also could help your opponent draw. But yeah, Nat the Darkfisher is also rotating out. That's from Whisper of the Old Gods.
Oh damn.
Um, so maybe we'll see some more kind of effects like that if they want to keep Moldex alive. I'm not entirely sure they do. They've not really ever actively tried to support Moldex, I would say. I
Because it
mean,
goes against their philosophy of it being fun and it's active, right?
yeah,
Like because Mill particularly, it's also one of those strategies that even though it's not particularly good, when it has seen a little bit of fringe play, it it's very frustrating for newer players and like the broader player base to play against because it feels like oh, I just play stuff in there but bounce it to my hand and they're making me overdraw and they make me burn my cards. It's I'm not I can't do cool stuff, right?
yeah. On the other hand, though, a lot of casual players enjoy Mill Rogue and Mill decks. I mean, the
Yeah,
Kingsbane Rogue is by far most popular at lower ranks, partly because the deck's not very good, because it just loses to aggro most of the time, and partly because that's, I think, a lot of the people that enjoy it, and a lot of people enjoy watching it, when it's being streamed. So, but I think that's because Mill Rogue has kind of fallen into the position where it's not powerful enough for people to hate it. It's
yeah,
just on the fringe there. But the other thing that it does have is mill decks in general have a very different game plan and style of play to other kind of decks. So it would be a
yeah,
pity if we kind of see mill decks, never being a thing again in Hearthstone. Or at least not in standard.
yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
I mean, maybe they will introduce also. Maybe like that's part of the idea is to introduce maybe other mechanics to kind of
yeah.
much like they introduced the quests,
Yeah. Other kind of mechanics that can maybe help
win
them.
the game.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah. Alternate.
win conditions.
Yeah. Alternate win conditions and alternate ways of playing, basically.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so next, I'm sure a change that is dear to your heart as a handlock player of years gone by. Molten Giant is being moved to the Hall of Fame, but not only that, it's also being reverted to its original mana cost, so unnerfed essentially. So it's going to go from 25 mana now to 20 mana, meaning that you can kind of play old school handlock with it. Although ultimately, old school handlock's probably not good enough to play in Wild, but if you do feel like it, you can now kind of play that deck again. So, what are your thoughts on the Molten Giant unnerfing and moving to Hall of Fame?
So initially, you think, okay, cool, it might, handlock is great, might be a thing. But then after, especially now this Wild Tavern Brawl and the free run I did, I decided to play the Naga Sea Witch Giants Warlock deck. It was pretty silly a lot of the times,
Yeah,
and like Molten Giant now with the reduced costs, I think makes it even easier to play.
yeah,
Yeah, it makes it easier to play now.
yeah. Now, you only have to take 5 damage
No, you
for it
can
to be
play for
free.
free. Actually, you don't even have to take.
Oh,
Wait for
you don't have to take any damage
no wait
because it reduces
because
its cost to 5.
yeah, so you
Yes.
basically still have to take. It doesn't change at all then, wait, does it? Because
No, no, no.
when it
Yeah, it
was
doesn't change at
25,
all.
it actually doesn't change anything in
Yeah,
that regard.
it doesn't change in its interaction with Naga Sea Witch, but
Yeah, I
it
just
changes in
realized that.
that it becomes more usable as a general tool for the deck, right? Like
Yeah,
Clockwork and Mountain Giants, which sometimes you can kind of just play from hand. Molten Giants will also be more playable before you're very
so we'll
dead.
see
So
if it makes the deck that much, more powerful. Because I
yeah,
mean that is quite a force, but yeah, I mean, also it's one of the sad things though, because like the whole sets of sort of giants, the fact that this one's rotated out, it feels like you're losing some of the core parts. I mean, Molten Giant was like Sea Giant, Molten, and Mountain
Mountain.
have been there since the beginning,
Yeah,
and and like a lot of old control decks used to play Molten, so it's like a bit sad, like sort of a sad reminiscent, of the good old days. if I were.
Sure. I mean, I think it's good. I think we could maybe it would be cool to see some other giants actually going into the classic set. That would be quite
Yeah.
interesting. Even if they kind of rotate the giants that are in standard, that could be quite interesting over time. Um, but yeah, most of all, I think what's interesting about this change, this Hall of Fame move, is that they're unnerving it, right? And
Yeah.
what that kind of signals for the future of Hearthstone, it kind of signals that they could be open to doing with this with some other previously nerfed cards. Warsong Commander is obviously the one that springs to mind, enabling old school Patron Warrior. Now, whether that would be any good or not in Wild is another debate, but it would just be interesting, for people that want to go back and play some of those old school decks.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I would not mind, them unnerving like Ancient of Law,
Yeah.
because I
Uh,
mean, even now, if people think about it, it would probably actually not see play in many Druid decks right now, if you think about it.
yeah, it definitely would be a lot more fringe with Ultimate Infestation running around. But once Ultimate Infestation rotates out, then Ancient of Law would probably become problematic again. So yeah, it's difficult to say. But it is definitely an interesting precedent that Blizzard are setting with this Molten Giant change. And the one thing that is interesting is like they're doing this purely for Wild, right? Because Molten Giant is not a card that is relevant in Standard at all anymore.
Yeah.
So it seems to be something they're doing specifically with the unnerving part in mind and the wanting to make it maybe more powerful and wild for some decks like Handlock, or maybe they're wanting to kind of buff Wild in a way by making this or unnerving the Molten Giant.
I think it's potentially a good, like for those. I mean, even though they're big, like a minority, this might also be sort of a good sign for the diehard wild players. The fact that Blizzard are seem to be taking a more interest, like a deeper concern in the format.
Yeah,
The fact that they're making some change, they've made in recent times, two of the nerfs recently with Raza and what was the other
patches.
nerf? Patches, were largely just before the end of state rotation, so it was more a nerf to wild,
Yeah.
and now we have this unnerf of it, which is basically going to be helping the formats, and so maybe Blizzard are going, wait, maybe we also need to pay attention to wild a bit more as well.
Yeah, and I mean we have been seeing events like the Wild Brawl that happened over this last week, and the Wild Arena that's been happening as well. So I
Mm.
mean, it does seem they're trying to get a few more players interested in Wild as well. It'll be interesting. Or an interesting problem with Wild is that it's very difficult for newer players that might be interested in Wild to actually be involved, because it's very difficult to earn the card packs. You can't actually buy any of the older card packs with gold. They're
Yeah,
not in
yeah,
the
and
in-game
it's
stores.
very
You have to
difficult,
buy them with money on the like
and it's a
Blizzard
very
website.
awkward way to buy it though, as well.
Yes.
It's like you literally have to go to the interface, and yeah, you can't. The fact that you can't use it with gold, buy with gold.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that they might find a better way of doing it in the future.
Yeah. Like it's very difficult to get into Wild, and it feels like that's always going to be a limitation with the number of people that will be playing Wild, right? Which is
Yeah,
kind of one of the issues with it. But moving on, because there's still quite a lot to cover. They're also making changes to the quests going forward. Basically, they're going to make some
quests
of the
as in your
quests.
daily quests, just
Yeah,
to just to
yeah.
clarify.
Yeah, the daily quests. So they're gonna be making some of them cheaper, and they're gonna be making some of them give more of a reward. Um, so, for example, a quest like Only the Mighty, which requires you to play 20 minions that cost 5 or more and rewards 40 gold, is going to be changing to play 12 minions that cost 5 or more and rewards 50 gold. So basically, it looks like all the 40 gold ones are going to become 50 gold quests instead, which is nice because at least that's half a pack, right? Makes a bit of a difference.
And then
And
and then
yeah,
some of these 60 gold quests they're actually going to make easier. So the example they give is play 50 class cards, reward 60 gold. The new one, you only have to play 30 class cards.
yeah,
And
for still the 60 gold. So they're not upping the gold on the better quests, let's say, but they're making them easier. 50 class cards can take quite some time sometimes, especially if the neutral cards happen to be very powerful at the time and nobody's really playing, or a lot of the decks, let's say, have a majority of neutral cards.
and
Um,
also as a sorry, just
Yeah.
as a, like let's say if you're a more competitive player, it's also really awkward. Like let's say play 30 class cards of a class which is currently really bad
Yes.
in the competitive. Like so like currently when I get like quests of like play 30 play play 50 shaman cards, you're like, well,
Yeah.
okay, I'll re-roll that one hopefully.
Yeah, it seems like with most of these quests, they're going to be like roughly halving them, a little bit less than half. So like 20 to 12, 50 to 30, and for like class victory, the one where you just have to win 2 games with the class, that's changing to win 1 game with the class and going to
Yeah.
reward 50 gold now. So it seems they're like roughly taking 40 to 50% off. It's 40, 50% off your quests, and they reward 10 more gold. That's the moral of the story here. Overall,
Sort
I
of a
mean,
nod to
it's
the
just
free to play aspect.
yeah, it's just good to make Hearthstone easier to play on the grind, which is yeah, definitely good and something that people have been complaining about. So it's only really a good change. Obviously, some people might complain that it's not enough, but overall, they're making it
Something's better than
they're
nothing.
making you have to spend less money, so that's good for you and not necessarily good for them. Although if you keep more people happy, that should be good. Anyway, moving on. Uh, to what some consider the biggest news of the patch, and that's the new druid hero Lunara. So we're going to be finally getting the female druid skin. Um, Lunara is one of Cenarius' daughters, so definitely got the druid blood in her. She's a dryad, which just reminded me of Bambi or Enchantress from Dota, but you know. Um, Overall, I mean, and to earn Lunara, you just have to win 10 games in the new Year of the Raven. So very much like Maiev was for Year of the Mammoth. So
And speaking of which, as soon as the new expansion, the new year of the Raven goes up, is released, you won't be able to earn Maiev anymore. It looks like they're kind of
yeah,
doing this thing where as a celebration of the new year, they give you get you get the hero skin, and
yeah,
so it will be interesting though in the future if they will make, let's say, like Maiev earnable in another way, because I mean, obviously, let's say you start playing the game next year.
yeah. The thing is, or even just later this year, right?
Yeah,
The thing is, it's kind of nice though that they're keeping them in some way exclusive. You just have to have played during that given standard year, right? Like they're not hard to earn at all. I mean, you can earn them in casual mode even
yeah,
if you have ranked anxiety. So they're very easy to earn. Um, it's just kind of an indication that you actually played in a given year. So it's like
yeah,
a card back for the year almost.
yeah, yeah. In a way, yeah, yeah. Okay, fair enough. Like a
Um,
trophy.
yeah, and I mean, it could be quite possible that they won't give any way to get them back. I mean, Khadgar is the example of another limited time hero as well.
Yeah.
Um,
They
and
have said they are looking like they are gonna at some point maybe make him available again.
yeah,
So I mean, obviously we'll
wasn't
have to see.
Tyrande also?
Yeah, Tyrande was, but Tyrande was actually quite difficult to get because it was strictly related to Twitch Prime.
No, I know, but
Yeah,
that's also limited. Like
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
have Twitch Prime now and no Tyrande.
Yeah, it was also
So
limited edition. Yeah.
anyway, are you gonna be a Lunara person or are you gonna stick with Malfurion?
I don't know. For me, it will come down to the emotes as well as how nice the portrait actually looks. Also, like
And what the hero
as
power
silly,
looks like?
yeah, exactly. As silly as it sounds, it's gonna have to also be how the hero power looks and sounds, because one of the reasons why, like in recent times, I've decided to actually stop using Nemzi is specifically because the hero power, like I think it still takes a bit longer than the Gul'dan's in terms of the animation, as well as her voice. It can get
Yeah.
a bit annoying at times.
It's all about the I'm thinking like thing that happens, that dialogue one when you're just thinking like if they say something annoying like ooh, what am I going to do next? Like like then no. Like I don't emote very often, so the emotes don't matter too much. But if they say something annoying, something long, lengthy, something that breaks my train of thought whilst I'm actually thinking, that's a problem. And obviously, you can just mute them, but I don't mute. I mean, you can mute all in-game sounds, but I don't quite mute it. It's just on very low for me. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that is a reasonable factor to decide with. I'm definitely gonna see as well how Lunara feels in game first before I decide whether I'm gonna use her. So, moving on to what we would probably consider the most important factor in or the most important announcement in the Year of the Raven announcement, and that's tournament mode.
No, it's not
Uh,
not tournament, not tournament mode. So the
yeah,
reason
yeah,
we joke about this
that's
is because in the video,
uh,
Ben Brode is very careful to actually not call it tournament mode and only
yes, yeah.
refers to it as in-game tournaments. But it's basically a tournament mode.
Yeah, they just don't want to use the term that's been hyped up so much before, right?
Yeah,
I think that's largely what it is. So we're getting in-game tournaments, as Pandemonia correctly states, and as the
the
blue
blue.
post actually has. So from what we get from the screenshot, is just that they're gonna have formats. So we can see it says Swiss tournament. So that's cool. The formats are gonna be managed in-game client, so that makes it much easier for tournament organizers and fireside creators. And that means that it's going to threaten a lot of the support websites like Battlefire and Striveware and stuff, and that'll be interesting as to how they react going
Actually, yeah,
forward. And what we can also see is it has 3 decks, Last Hero Standing, so it has a format. I'm guessing it has Conquest as well, at least Conquest and Last Hero Standing. And you can specify the number of decks, which basically determines what it's best of, like a best of 5 or best of 3, etc. They've also said for now there's not going to be any ban, so immediately that kind of rules this out for most competitive uh, tournaments, whether those be Challenger Cup or HCT events. They all usually have 4 decks, 1 ban. And then it also has like a maximum number of players. In this case, it's 6 players, which obviously kind of makes sense a little bit for a Swiss tournament. But if you had like a single elimination with 6 players, that would be odd, because you'd be getting 2 players getting buys. So yeah, and it also just has a time and the person that's created the tournament. So the first thing that sticks out to me when looking at this screenshot is just that, oh, this is for a fireside gathering, right? Like that's
yeah,
kind of the first thing, that because we don't see any kind of tournament browser or anything like that. What they've apparently said is that you're gonna be able to invite people on your friends list um, to tournaments. And I think that they also confirmed that you'll be able to get a tournament code to have people join the tournament. So that means there's still going to need to be, secondary websites where people are posting these codes in order to get people to join the tournaments. So,
yeah.
maybe for a fireside as well, you can have the code up on the wall kind of thing. Um, for people to see and join, or if it's for an online tournament, you're gonna have to have some kind of website where the code is revealed at a given sign up time, basically.
Yeah. Also, the thing is, they, as I mentioned, it's going into beta late, like probably middle of this year.
Yeah.
So, and they've already said, initially it's going to be a very bare bones. So, like you see in the screenshot, it's going to probably just state out, okay, this is the format. And even, even they haven't elaborated much. As I mean, there was supposed to actually be a Q&A session, but because of the ranked issues, they actually cancelled it.
Yeah.
But that's another topic. But with regards to they like that, there's no bans yet, and I mean, you hear people, obviously everybody wants a lot of cool different stuff in tournament mode,
Mm,
but obviously, a lot of these things are probably going to take time. Bans are
yeah.
obviously going to take time.
Yeah, there's a lot of like technical questions as people that are very involved in playing tournaments, and even pseudo kind of involved in hosting tournaments, or at least advising the hosts of tournaments. Um, there's a lot of questions. Like for instance, how do they calculate their Swiss pairings and stuff like that is actually a an interesting technical question, because different websites, if you look at them, do that kind of differently. If like I think Battlefy compared to Smash.gg, they do their Swiss system a little differently, and how they also determine tiebreakers. Um, so these kind of things are also going to be interesting. It'll be interesting to maybe see if there's some way to import a rule set going forward. Like
Yeah,
we had importing deck codes, you could have maybe an importing rule set where you can have a format, and it'll just recognize a format in the same way it recognizes a card. Um,
Because my question though, like because like my first question is a lot of people have asked a lot of questions, but my question is, like they say, currently there's no bans.
Hmm.
So now if you want to have a tournament with bans, will you be because they've mentioned that they're going to be checking decks, right? And verifying decks. So they could either just mean they verify, okay, it's standard or it's wild, or I mean what I'm assuming and hoping for obviously is they verify your deck as in the 30 cards to make sure that, and it essentially like for the Tavern Hero Brawl where it locks your decks for the
Yeah.
tournament. But now introduce a scenario where you want to play a best of five with four picks and one ban, right? And before they've set up the bans, you're then going to have to pick four decks. But then how's it going to verify correctly that you've played one? Because you're going to it's how will it let you report it? Because let's say
Well,
you win with
yes,
three.
yes. I know what you're saying. So
There's
conquest,
not
right? Where you
yeah
can't play the same
conquest.
deck, or even last year standing where you have to stick with the same deck. My assumption is that that rule system is gonna have to be baked into the client, the Hearthstone client now.
So they might
So
have to
so
do
let's
bans quite
say
early on.
let's say you have the ability. No, no. Let's say it comes up with no bans, right? We've got three decks for this conquest tournament. Now when I've won with the deck, that deck now becomes unselectable. I can only select
Okay.
the other two decks. You get a tick or some anything, right? Last hero standing, it loses, you get an X, like the X we have for an invalid deck, on the deck. Um, and obviously for like last hero standing, it would not allow you to select decks if you won, so you would just have to kind of keep going with the deck. So I think that basic functionality is going to have to be built in. So there's obviously going to have to be a different kind of challenge screen when you're playing somebody from the tournament that doesn't have your decks from ranked or from your collection. It kind of
Yep.
just has the decks that you've registered with, for this tournament. Um,
No, but what I'm saying
the interesting
is,
thing is also going to be around like deck lists. How do you have a revealed deck list format? Where do other people see your deck lists? What anyway?
but I mean, what I'm saying is the main thing will be then basically in the beginning when there's no band supported, you probably actually won't be able to use the tool.
No, but they don't have to have bans supported in order to do what I'm saying with like I'm almost 100% sure that the format itself will have to be baked in. Last Hero Standing and Conquest, it will not let you select the wrong decks.
Yeah, but I'm
Uh,
saying let's say I want to
so
select. Let's say I need four decks though, right?
yes,
Because
okay,
it's a,
yes, but you're talking about bans. I'm saying the formats themselves will work irrespective of bans. Now the
yeah,
problem with bans is you need a whole different screen for bans as well, where bans actually happen.
no, I
Um,
understand that. But what I'm saying is, will okay. So the question is basically, will we as let's say, will we be able to host tournaments with Conquest using this tool, or until they bake it in later, let's say when they release it properly, we have to still basically do what we're doing now, where you challenge friends and things.
yes.
Until then, what I'm saying is, you won't be able to run tournaments. You won't be able to try and have a like makeshift. You won't be able to improvise the tool, the in-game tournament mode to in order to run tournaments with bands. Is what I'm
Yes,
saying.
I mean there obviously has to be some level of configurability for the tool for the tournaments. I'm guessing because it already specifies formats and time and those kind of things. So you surely need to be able to configure that. But currently one of the like options that obviously isn't configurable is bans, right? So that's
Yes.
something that will need to be implemented further on. But for now, I imagine it has to allow configuration for the things we're seeing there, right? The structure of the tournament, Swiss in this case, the last hero standing, so your format, then with the number of decks, the max players, and the time. Those are all, and even the name. Those are all things that need to be configured. So there needs to be some way of configuring it. So either they
Yeah.
have some in-game client for setting it up, or some other tool that allows you to generate a code or something that will, represent the format in game and allow people to join a tournament of that format. So I think that's kind of at least how I see it going forward. But we're gonna definitely have to see how it works out, or what comes out of that Q&A session.
Yeah.
Um, okay, but overall, I mean, you're definitely excited about tournament mode, right?
Definitely. Like from both a player point of view and from like organizing tournaments, I think and hopefully it will make like life a lot easier.
Yeah. It makes like admin mistakes on Battlefy or any of those kind of things, or admins not knowing how to use the tools, a lot easier. They'll just have to learn one tool going forward, and hopefully it encourages more people to host tournaments as well. Because
Yeah.
for a lot of people, the technical side of hosting a tournament could have definitely been a barrier to entry. So this should definitely
And more
help.
players as well.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully it helps, get more advertising for, let's say, firesides and stuff like that as well. And speaking of firesides, one other little footnote in the patch notes, or sorry, patch notes, the announcement is they mentioned they have a little note here saying fireside gathering fun. So it says, and I'll just quote this: If you're not familiar with fireside gatherings, they're a great way to get out and meet people just as passionate about Hearthstone as you are. Fireside gatherings mean a lot to us, and we're working on even more features to support them during the Year of the Raven. So, I mean, this is pretty good, right? This sounds like tournament. Like the way I pictured tournament mode at first was that it was going to be mostly focused around being used at fireside gatherings, because it isn't quite up to scratch for competitive yet. From what they've kind of teased, and this kind of indicates that they're going to do even more for fireside gatherings. We saw a little bit of support with the banners and stuff that we've seen over the last year or so, and also like the Nemsi as a kind of promotion to encourage people to go to firesides. So any kind of speculation you have maybe about ideas for what they might be planning for firesides?
Uh, we can speculate. I mean, maybe more, more support in the fact of like maybe specific game. Like obviously they've already got the Fireside Brawl,
Yeah,
but maybe they might even add extra things to Fireside, Fireside gatherings.
yeah,
Maybe they're trying to give more support in terms of not like game wise, but in terms of like promotional material. Maybe they're trying to make them more
yeah,
official in the sense, much like Magic the Gathering's FNM, right?
yeah. The
Where
the,
you
the
have proper
outside.
signage, proper labeling, proper branding, those sort of things.
Yeah, the outside of game kind of thing. And maybe
Yeah,
they could even have, like, you earning points from fireside gatherings that go towards,
a rating
like
of
in-game
sorts.
promotional content. No,
Exactly.
they wouldn't do it as a rating, I don't think, because they're not intended to be competitive, more of
Oh,
a
fair enough. Yeah, yeah.
participation thing. So if you go to enough firesides, then you get Nemsi rather than, let's say, getting Nemsi straight away from your first fireside, for instance. So
Oh, so some sort of
participating
in-game
kind of thing.
currency, maybe, like
Yeah,
some sort of yeah.
I doubt they'd put it in game, but it would be like out of game, and yeah, and there'd be some way for you to track it. Maybe something like that, like a rewards program. I'm suggesting. Or
I can see that.
alternatively, speaking of rewards, it could be like rewards for the Fireside Brawl. Currently, there isn't any reward for that, or even rewards for Fireside tournaments, right?
Yep.
Maybe adding a structure where the fireside the innkeepers actually get allocated, like, let's say 10 packs for this tournament, or like 2 packs or 1 pack per person that arrives for your tournaments, and then they can be split out as winnings or something, because it's a way for Blizzard to be directly involved in the winnings. That's actually not going to cost them anything, but it's going to promote more people to play. And currently they do support innkeepers by sending them like plushies and stuff, and those are great. I hope those don't stop. But having the other things like packs and stuff could definitely encourage people to go to firesides, and also would just make life easier for the fireside for the innkeepers, right, that are running them.
Yep. And even I mean, probably. I mean, ultimately, I don't know if it's needed, but even integration between the Fireside Gathering and tournament mode in a way,
Yeah,
because
I'm assuming that should happen relatively early on in the tournament mode
with like
infrastructure.
where it's like seamlessly integrated
Yeah, so
instead
like
of being like two separate areas.
picking up that there's like a local tournament going on, like it knows that you're in a fireside, area.
Yeah,
So
something like
like
that.
that kind of thing. That would be useful. Okay, so moving on from these announcements, there was a recent announcement about the next Tavern Brawl that's coming. It is going to be a StarCraft related Tavern Brawl for celebrating 20 years of StarCraft. Uh, Unlike when they celebrated 20 years of Diablo and they gave away a card back, they're going to be giving 3 Kobolds and Catacombs packs for participating in the Tavern Brawl. So make sure you don't miss the Tavern Brawl. It's going to be March 21st to 25th, so end of the month. Make sure you participate in that, as the reward is basically going to be tripled for what we usually get from Tavern Brawls. And it's nice that when they're doing these rewards, they're also giving, the latest expansion packs, which is even better. Um, as I'm sure a lot of the people that are, religiously paying Tavern Brawls have started generating a decent classic collection, and could definitely do with some of the other newer cards. So I think that's pretty good. And I mean, there's a lot of other rewards for the other games as well. So make sure you take part in those as well at the time. But for us here, we're focused on Hearthstone, and everyone likes free packs.
Yes. And
Yeah.
oh, speaking of which, I don't know if you want to talk about the ranked
Yeah.
downtime.
So speaking of three Kobolds and Catacombs packs in particular, everyone's also going to be getting three free Kobolds and Catacombs packs as an apology from Blizzard for the ranked mode downtime that happened at the very beginning of this month. There was some technical errors that happened as the kind of system was changing from the older system to the newer system. I imagine that largely was the contributor there. Um, Ultimately, ranked mode was disabled for a while as people were losing and gaining a massive number of stars for winning and losing.
Yeah, there was some
Um,
screenshots of people reaching rank 0 legend.
oh, really? Wow. Yeah, okay. So like, and then even when they came back, things were a bit weird. I started the season at rank one, 5 stars, which was pretty nice. Apparently, it had something to do with where you finished in Legend as well. There was some correlation there. So like people that finished relatively high up in Legend got the rank one, 5 stars or something. Or Blizzard said it had to do with whether you'd played games or not. And for me, the only game I played on the ranked season was the very last game of the last season, like that went over 1 a.m. here, so over midnight for ticking into the next day, and I won that game like basically after 12. So that was the only game I won in the season, and it reset me to rank 4 or 5, or set me to rank 4 5 stars at the time after winning. Which was kind of odd as well because apparently you're only supposed to be get to set to 3 stars if you reach legend. It should be rank 4 3 stars or something. There was I think Yongwu some said that on Twitter or something about where exactly it reset people to. So yeah, this season was a complete mess, and it's a bit weird right now. Even I like there's some weird things going on with the MMR where basically because there's like a bunch of people that are in Legend but most people aren't, and there's like when I was playing in Legend I was just facing rank 1 people a lot, and it seems you're gaining very little MMR for actually playing them, and you lose a lot if you gain very little MMR for winning and you lose a lot for losing. So it's basically bad to play at Legend right now, or you're just going to tank further down, and that makes the climb harder when it comes towards the end of the season. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Um, interesting. It's interesting to see. I think they might have snuck some other changes in here with the matchmaking system and this ranked play changes, but it was definitely a mess. But it was a good time to play the Wild Tavern Brawl. That's definitely what I spent my time doing instead, and we're gonna get 3 packs from it, so that's pretty cool. So 6 free packs upcoming between the StarCraft celebration and the ranked play breaking apology. Um, okay, and finally, of course, we have our esports segment. Um, it was HCT Sydney over the last weekend, and Jack Attack managed to win that, beating uh, sorry, I think he beat. Who did he beat in the final? Was it Professor Oak?
No, Professor Oak lost in the third, fourth.
Ah, okay. Because of the
Lost in
time
the winners bracket
difference,
final.
I was asleep long before the actual finals happened. I managed to catch a bit of it, and honestly, there was some sketchy play. A lot of newer players to the scene, especially from New Zealand and Australia. I mean, Professor Oak's probably the only one of, oh, and Joan are probably the only two known players from those regions that were at this event. And so, definitely a player that's new. I mean, this was his first tournament that he participated in, the qualifiers, and this was therefore his first tournament that he played, Jack Attack, and he won it. So I mean,
Odyssey came second.
oh, okay, Odyssey came second. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah, so it was a good result for him. It was a tournament that was heavily dominated by APAC region players, basically. With the Hot Meowth being basically the only non-APAC region player at the event. Um, and yeah, I mean, overall, there was a very wide mix of deck lists. Everything from Cube Druid or Charge Druid or whatever you want to call it, OTK Charge Druid deck from that Ghost was playing in his super weird lineup, to a lot more of the standard lineups and standard decks, and I think it was the standard or the slightly more standard lineups that did a bit better. Jack Attack did have an Nzoth OTK Paladin though in his winning lineup, but he just had Secret Mage, Cube Lock, and Spiteful Priest alongside that. So the other three decks a lot more standard, let's say, or a lot more um, commonly seen. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely an event to go back and watch for some of the interesting moments. In particular, Ghost, uh, his games, though they were very interesting to watch. I mean, he had the Elemental Jade Shaman that we've seen Purple playing a bit recently, Quest Rogue, OTK Control Paladin, and his Charge Druid deck. So definitely you're going to see some games there that are unlike most of what we see in HCT. And honestly, like some of it was a bit shaky as well. I mean, overall, I think it wasn't the best tournament in terms of showing us the highest skill players in the world, but it did earn them a lot of HCT points. So we're going to be seeing quite a few of these players again, I imagine, including Jack Attack, definitely going to be involved in um, the playoffs, I imagine, as he's obviously earned a lot of points towards that. Um, so yeah, uh, I I don't think you did you actually catch any of HCT Sydney?
Unfortunately, I didn't. The time differences was other things, but
Yeah,
I mean, I did hear about some of the matches, through social media and through some like listening to some podcasts. I heard of like some of the sort of, I would say like funnier or some of like the really bad misplays or some of the really funny moments of the tournament.
yeah,
Or like the fact that the guy who won the final Jack Attack, he won with Exodia Paladin.
yeah.
So that's besides that, not much. I didn't hear really much else about the event.
Yep, and I did see him doing a shoey with a bottle of champagne or something that he drank. He poured the into the trophy and then into a shoe. Yeah, it's gross. But anyway, typical New Zealander thing. I'm gonna pretend like I know anything about that. So yeah, that was the HCT event. There isn't one coming up, or there wasn't one this weekend because we're kind of recording this on a Sunday. It's a bit late. But there will be some more coming up this month. I think there's HCT Oslo and Bangkok that are coming up this month or coming up soon. Those are the next two major HCT events at least. Um, and yeah, so that's pretty much all we have for this week. We just kind of did this episode as a quick last minute catch up because we wanted to make sure we at least had an episode in for this week due to some scheduling conflicts. So we don't have prepared tips for the week for this week. But we will be back next week with that segment, which will be a regular segment, I promise. Um, so yeah, we'll be back next week with that segment and the rest of the news, and also some other upcoming news on the new sets maybe, and some speculation around that. But that's all we have for this episode 51 of Magma Rages. Thanks a lot everyone for watching. Apologies once again for the delay in the episode. Uh, the end of season Legend Climb was something I was kind of focused on and didn't really have much of a chance on Wednesday, and then scheduling conflicts after that. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. If you want to find out more or give us any feedback, which we really appreciate, you can find us on Twitter. You can find Pandemonia at PandemoniaZA on Twitter, and you can find myself at Dib_gaming on Twitter. And you can also leave us any comments on the YouTube videos. It helps generate uh, or it helps spread the videos, and also of course sharing any of the videos really helps as well. That helps get more people involved in the Magma Rages community, as we say, and helps us get more feedback and just keep improving the podcast, which is really something we want to do now. So yeah, thanks a lot everyone from me. Cheerio.
Cheerio.